Good day, everyone. 3D Create here. Just wanted to go over basically a tutorial on how to create empties to basically get this drone to fly. So I thought this would be really cool. So if you want to download this object from my Patreon page, the link will be down below. Okay, so here we go. So this drone here is basically an object that I brought from Plasticity that I created. And everything is disconnected from each other right now. All I did here is just basically add in the textures and get it nice and clean. So this is the first step into creating empty animation. So first of all, we're going to actually go in and select the center section right here. This is like the center of the whole object. And I want to use this to make this the main location for everything. So to do that, you're going to go to Object, Transform, and I'm going to go with Set Origin to the center of mass. So that way, it already did this already, but that's where it actually goes into the center here. And then once you do that, normally your actual cursor is down here in the center when you start up, right? So what I want to do is I want to make this the main center point of the actual animation. So I want to make the master controller in the center of this. So do that, as discussed, you're going to go Set Origin to that object that I got selected to the center of mass, okay? Next, you're going to go to Object, and you hit Snap, and you're going to go to the Cursor to Selected. So now that the cursor is in the center of this object, in the very, very center, that's exactly where I want it to be. So then I can go here to add in the empty. This way the empty will be placed exactly at that cursor. That's the way it works. Wherever the cursor is at, the empty or whatever you bring in will go to the cursor. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to deselect to make sure I don't have that cursor selected because it starts moving on its own. So now I got this here. I'm going to actually call this the main controller. So that will be easy to understand what that is. And something else I can do here to kind of help me define where this stuff is, I just put a bunch of lines here, it kind of goes across this area so I see that there's my main controller. Okay, so that's one thing. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to duplicate this. So I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on somewhere over here and just paste. So now I got a second one here. I'm going to bring this over here. And this one, I'm going to select it and call it the left shroud controller. And then I'm going to do the same thing, copy, and then go ahead and paste over here. Again, it went over there, that's okay. And this one, we're just going to change it to right. Right, cool. So now I got these kind of all in the same spot, right? I'm going to basically look at it from the y-axis, and I want to make sure that the left's on the side, the right's on the side. So if I'm facing the object and it's facing me, the left will be on this side, the right will be on this side. So let's go ahead and select the right. I'm going to hit the G key, and then I'm going to hit the X key, and I'm going to move this over somewhere about here is fine. It doesn't have to be exact. This is going to be the controller to help pull this in and out and rotate left and right. So that's what this is all about. So now if I select the left shroud, go back to the Y, I'm going to hit again the G key on the X, and I'm going to move this over here. So somewhere about here will be fine. Cool. Okay, so now we got two of the controllers set up. I want to make sure that the whole thing is connected to this controller. All right, so let's go and select the left and right one. And then, of course, the last one, which would be the main with the shift key. And that way, this main one is like the light blue. It means it's the last one that's selected. That's how you actually add in like relationships of a parent. So go to Object, Parent, Object. So now these actual units are both underneath the main controller. So wherever the main controller goes, the left and right go with it. Basically rotating, moving, or scaling, any of those things. So that's kind of the way to set that up. So now the left side, I want to make sure that I actually select it. And now go ahead and select all these sections right here, except for this. I do not want the main unit selected, only the left side, or actually that'd be the right side. So this is all the right side. I got it turned around. I got to make sure I get that right. So this is your right side. And what I need to do now is select the right controller with the control key. Now these are all selected. I'm going to go ahead and, since that's the last one I actually selected, which is what you need to do, you go to Parent, Object. So what that means is now that everything on that right side, whenever this moves, for instance, if I hit G on this one, on the X, this whole thing will move. So right click to let go. And then the same thing on the other side. So we'll go back to the kind of the top view and we'll select the other side now. Make sure you right click and deselect that one and this one. And now everything on the, whoops, got the wrong one again. So when the Z axis is turns it around basically 180 degrees. So this time I'm going to select this side or this side. Just like that. Right click, control. Actually one more time. Select all this. Do that, this. And so that's about it right there. Now that's all selected. It's the left side. Now we want to make sure that the left side now is with the control key selected. Last, object, parent, object. There we go. So now if the left side, G key on the X, moves, the whole thing moves with it. So there we go. So what we can do now is we can actually select everything but those things. Actually, what we can do to make it a little easier is just hide everything that's underneath this one, everything under this one, right? Now everything else is selected. We can select the whole thing, get rid of the ground. Now that we got everything here selected, what we could do now is select the main. Make sure we got everything right here. Okay, so now we select the main with the control key. And now everything there will be actually connected to the main controller. So let's go ahead and hit, again, Object. We'll go ahead, Parent, Object. And there we go. So now if I close this out, or if I close these out, we pretty much got everything controlled now. So if I unhide this, I want to make sure that everything's working properly. So now if I select this main controller and I hit the G key, everything here will move along with the actual main controller. That's what we want. So I thought I went to Eevee just to make it a little easier to kind of see as I work through this stuff a little bit better. Even though it's not what I'm rendering in, I just wanted to make it quicker and easier for people to see the actual objects as I move stuff through. So a couple things that would make more sense to me to make things faster for everybody is that we really need to have a way to hide these other parts of the object so we're not constantly having so much detail here. So I thought what would make it a little bit easier to hide stuff would be just to add another empty to this scene. So let's go ahead and go back to empty here, plane axis. And I'm going to call this center objects, just so I know what I'm doing here. And we can actually take this now and hit the control and main controller, and I'm going to actually add that to the parent there. So now that is now underneath this, which is here. The problem is this went in the wrong place, of course, which is fine. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit the G key, since I'm selecting it now, and on the X, move it over to the center right about there. Now this is not going to be animated of any sort, so I'm not really worried about this. But at the same time, I want to make sure it's kind of this in the right place. So I can leave it there. And now that we've done that, I want to take everything else and kind of like just add it to this empty here so I can hide things easier. So what I could do here is just go ahead and select this one. And I'm going to hit the shift, 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 so I can hide everything on the right. And then again, hit all these with the shift on the left. And this is pretty much everything that's left, right? So we got the main controller, we have this controller. So the main controller, I could just hide this for right now. And now let's select everything here, except for that, right click it. And I got everything selected, right? So what I could do now is use this. So use the control key, select the center objects, and we're going to add this to the object, parent, object. Okay, so now we got basically a few of these. Actually, want to make sure all these here, for some reason, those did not go over. Let's make sure we do this again. Hit the control. And we're going to, again, parent, object. Now, it could be they're actually connected to something by accident. Go ahead and do. To make this easier, I'm going to select it all. Going back to object. And I'm going to go to parent, and I'm going to clear and keep transforms. Now that I've done all that, I want to take those objects again. At this time, let's go and select the shift key. So now it's selecting the last one, which is the center objects, which should be this one. So make sure that's the last one selected. Now we got all those in place. Now let's do this again. Object, parent, object. And keep transforms, fine. Hit OK. So now I could actually I see what the problem is. I got to take this out of here, number one. So let's take this out. Now that I've done that, everything is doing what it's supposed to do. So there we go. So now if I select this, hit shift, shift, everything disappears. So now I have nothing on my screen. So this is a great way to help clear up all your mess. So another way you can hide everything here, right? Just bring this out of the way. The center one now, we can select it and everything's there. We can bring it up. And this needs to go to this one. So we got to make sure we do that. So object, parent, object. Okay. So now everything's underneath this that is part of this object, which is your center, your left shroud, a right shroud. And that makes it a lot easier to control things. So let's go ahead and now unhide all this. We have everything in place. And we can also do that. Okay, cool. So now that we've done all that, so we got a couple options here. We could either just animate the propellers on their own, or we could add another empty to the propeller. You get two options basically. They both work fine. As long as you're not doing a lot of changes, I think the easiest way for me is just to add this to the actual shroud to move with that and just rotate around the center axis. So one thing you got to make sure is that your object main piece is in the center. So wherever that lies, that has to be in the center. So if you go to the top view here, you'll see that this is right in the center of the axis. So when that rotates, it works properly. Now, one thing as well to keep in mind is that we want this to rotate only on the Z. The Z is up and down. So we could take all these off, just like that. basically, it's going to follow this no matter what happens, right? So that makes it real simple. Wherever that goes, that goes. So if I want to rotate this now, it will rotate right along that center. And that works great because it's just simple to do. So that's already set up. Now this one here, we got to make sure it's on the right one, of course. But this also, I want to make sure that it rotates only on the Z. So lock, lock. And again, rotate it. And see right now, see how it's kind of moving away? This is not in the right place. So what you got to do, make sure there's no keyframes, number one. Select the object, and we're going to go here, set origin to center of the mass. So that way it's center of the actual top here, like it's supposed to be. See, again, it's in the very center. And that's perfect where it needs to be. And that's all we really need to do with that. So now I could select this and basically rotate it. So let's rotate it. So that works great. It's very simple to use. It stays. That's all we need to do. Okay, so now we got everything rigged. It's that simple. Let's go ahead and start animating this thing. So let's start with the shroud. I kind of want to basically have this thing start up and start working itself. So frame one, I want to hit the key here on the actual X, and I'm going to bring this in kind of like this. So frame one starts off. And I'm also going to do the same thing on this one. So frame one, G key on the X, and move it in just like that. So it kind of looks like it's kind of covered. Now, for instance, a thought process would be like, I'm starting this up, I hit the button, and then at frame 30, this thing spins out. So again, hit this. And one thing I don't want it to do, I don't want to move this on this axis. I don't want to move it on this axis. I only want to move it in and out of the X. So one way to control that is to lock everything but the X. So there we go. So now at frame 30, I'm going to go ahead and G key this just like this. Wherever I'm going to put this, I want this to be able to rotate around this without hitting this side. So right here, it's still a little too not far enough out. So G key, move it out a little bit more. Something like that would be great. So now it looks like it's all kind of working itself out. And then we'll go back to the front view. And we'll do the same thing on this side. So frame 30. Again, let's control everything but the X, G, and that way it just moves automatically in the right axis. This is kind of like right about there on both. Cool. All right, so that's it for that. Now, so it's going to go like this, right? It's very simple. Hit the play button, see how it looks. Now at frame 60, I want to rotate this now. So the rotation is going to be on the, basically on the, again, the X. So got to make sure these are locked. And I'm going to rotate this. Basically, if you don't go right on the right axis, it kind of locks right, like a gimbal lock. So we're going to rotate it here. I'm going to copy this, Control C, hit OK, and this one too. And then we'll go over to the side, rotate, again like this, and we can actually Control B. But because it's the opposite side, we can put a negative there. So it does the right thing. There we go. And so what that does, again, one thing to keep in mind, it's rotating. It goes out, and at 60, the rotation doesn't seem to be adding to itself. So here, I want to make sure I go to the side view here, and then we'll rotate this again back to the normal axis, like that. So this is going to be Control V. This time, yeah, that's exactly what I want right there. And that's exactly centered. So now when I do that, I can go back here and do the same thing on this side. Rotate it back. Again, Control V and hit enter. But it's going to be negative 16. This one. There we go. So it's just opposite. All right. So now we can see what this looks like between those three frames. There we go. Simple, very simple. Just a real quick boom, boom. And we got that kind of set up now at frame 60, right? And then at 60, I want to start the blade. So the blade is going to start running at 0 here. So keep in mind, it's going to rotate on the Z-axis, which is fine. Right click, insert a frame at 60 at 0. So at frame 90, this is where I want to go 360 degrees. You can just type it in. I want the showing of the actual blade starting for this animation. So it's like this. Boom, 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 right? Same thing here. It's going to be at frame 60. I'm going to right click, insert a keyframe. And at 90, right here, I'm going to also insert or type it in 360 degrees. There we go. All right, cool. So let's see how that looks now. So this is a quick way to use keyframes with empties to get your point across of what you're trying to do. So 60 to 90 is 360. However, I want this to run 300 frames, so enter 300. This basically means that I still got more time to play on this. So actually, I think I'll go a little bit farther than that. I'd like to have at least 10 minutes or at least 10 seconds of animation of it flying. So that means I need 300 frames still to go. So I'm going to change this to about 390. I wanted to get at least the part of it starting and it flying from 90 to 300. So, okay, so another part. I want this blade now to rotate from here to here. And there's a lot of ways to test this, but I personally think, I'm going to shrink this down a little bit and bring this over. We go to 390. And basically, I want this thing constantly running as it's animating. So to do that, I would just say, go ahead and enter a good size number. So 360 was here. This is going to need to be quite a bit higher. So here, 390, I'm going to go with about at least 72,000. I kind of figured this out earlier, and it looked really nice at 72,000. So hit enter. And the other thing that we need to do is we want to make sure that we have the setup to be linear. And this one also linear. So easing mode or interpolation mode will be linear as well. And this can be basically easing mode could be ease in. Okay, now we can test this out. So let's hit the plus. And then it starts going. And it just works like it should. So a few more things that we want to make sure that we do is we always want to have on the camera. So when you set up your camera, in this collection here, I want to make sure that the motion is checked. So it gives the blur effect of the blade. It just looks so much better. All right, so that's that. So let's continue. So now we've got this one. I got to do the same thing here, 390. And again, I'm going to put 72,000, hit enter. So this is really strange that this is actually starting faster than this one. So what I've done to kind of correct the timing here, I just moved this a few frames over because it needs time to catch up with the other one. I think now it works fine. Maybe even a couple frames right there. So let's try it now. So it doesn't really start until actually it turns on. I think that's fine. So there we go. So that's part is that. So now we've gone to frame 90, and this thing is actually at a good angle. And what I need to do now is just basically grab this and move it. So at frame 90, I want to make sure this is going to be moved. The G key with the Z. So you want to make sure I select the main controller, which is this one. Again, this is a good way to figure out what you're doing. Hit the G key on the Z at 90, and we're just going to bring this up right here. Now it created that, and I'm actually going to go back in here and hit 0. Control 0. Actually, I want to go back to this one. Make sure I hit 0. All right. So the problem is it wasn't on 0. So let's go ahead and undo. So right here. It's at this number right here. So let's Control C this. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to right click, insert a keyframe for the main controller. So again, insert keyframe. There we go. So now that's been controlled. Now at 120, I'm going to move this up, straight up. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to rotate this on the Y. I'm sorry, the X. So rotate a little bit on the X, kind of like this. We're trying to give motion and inertia. So at 0, I want this to go back to 0. Okay, so while this is moving up, and it gives the effect as it's moving upward, right? So here, and then at 120, I'm going to go to 200, and I'm going to hit the G key on the Y and move this forward. Something like that. So let's see how this reacts. Boom, boom, boom. Now, I also suggest that while we're doing this, we can rotate this a little bit on the Y. Okay, we're going to do basically on the Y like that. And we could also move it in a little bit on the Y. See, this time it's going to be on the X like that. And then at 200, see how this is looking. So start it. It's all about timing. And now that we've done that turn, I need to make sure that I bring it back now on the Y, actually on the Y here to 0. Actually, I would suggest that you go opposite way a little bit. Give it more of a catching of the actual angle here. Just like that. Here we go. Play, pick up, start taking off, and then catch up. All right, cool. So 200 is really cool. Now we can go to, let's say, 300. And now we can rotate the main. Take that on the X again. Try to get at 0. And we're going to also move up on the Z out of the frame. The one thing we want to make sure that doesn't go too far. Again, it doesn't really matter. We can have the camera follow it. There. And then we can actually move it on the Y. This. Okay. So this is just a real quick, easy way to animate something. So let's go ahead and use the empties. It's definitely worth this power. There we go. Takes off. Cool. Now I would, first of all, go back to frame 01. Let's go back to the camera. Just take all these back, put it back on. Just think it'll look a lot nicer looking at what I'm doing here. So let's go back to camera view, active. And right now I have it at this angle. I'm going to rotate it around, something like this. I'm going to get more of a front view. So this will be camera. I'm going to use Control Alt and 0 to line myself up with it. Select it. Hit the G key on the Y. And we can put this back. And let's just get ourselves in a good placement there. Okay, cool. So this is where it starts off. And then right about here, it kind of teeters off on the height. So at 207, I'm going to select the camera and hit G. I'm going to catch up with this thing and move it back a little bit on the Y. Like it's following it like that. And then here, 300. G. Could do G with the Y again. G, Y. Back it up a little bit more. Okay, let's see how this looks. Right here, it's not keeping up. So I would definitely go here and kind of line yourself up. All right, see how this looks. It's going to take off. It's flying. It's going to start continuing. So at 300, it stops. So the next step would be to possibly drop it back down as an option. Okay, so basically I have this animating. It looks really cool. It has a good understanding what's going on. It's creating itself to basically climb up, and now it's moving along, and this other camera is following it, which is great. Now, right here it stops, which is what I do not want. I want continuous motion. So at 300, I really want, I think I want this to bring this out just a little bit more. I think to about 330. I think that will help give it more of a detailed understanding. And the camera's going to try to stay with it, of course. There'll be a point where it's still coming. And about right there, 330, I want to now go ahead and just bring this back down at 390. So it's going to take like basically 2 seconds to go down. So now that I've done this, what I want to do is cause the reaction to stopping. So to do that, I'm going to select the first one here. And right now, the last frame was way over here. So to have it stop at 330, I almost want it to basically, turn right before 330. So at 300, I'm going to rotate this on the X just a little bit, kind of like that, and go back one. So I created the frame. And then at 330, now I want to rotate the other way. So what I'm going to do is create this to go backwards. And that kind of slows down the whole object. And I'm going to do the same thing over on this other arm. So here, select this at 300. I'm just going to rotate it a little bit on the X here and then go back another degree. So that way it stays. And then at 330 again, I'm going to create the rotation the opposite way, just like that. Now, I also want to swing. So this object here, which is the main, I want to make sure that exactly at 330, I'm kind of like rotating it on the X. So we're going to bring it back a little bit. Not too much. About right there. And then at 300, same thing. I'm going to go back more like where we were. So like there. So let's see how that reads. Again, you got to do is stop, play until you get what you really want. And I thought this was pretty cool to understand how empties work. At 330, it pushes back up. And then at 390, I'm going to bring it back down. So we're going to hit the G on the Z, and we're going to bring this down. Let's go to the side here. I'm going to actually hide this. This needs to come all the way down, almost. So let's go ahead and continue to move it. G on the Z. And it needs to be right around. Number one, you got to make sure you keep the understanding of the first frame. The first frame is at this number, right? So we want to keep this Control C. And then we can go back to the last frame, which is here. And we could dial that in by putting it in, Control V. So this way it's exactly where it needs to be. And what we can do now at this frame, we want to make sure that we rotate this back. So let's go and rotate it. This should be exactly at 0, right? And this should be also at 0 for the main. Now, what we can also do, again, is take these and rotate them. So let's go and go to the side here. And we're going to rotate them so they're centered off of this, just like that. And same with this one. Rotate. And just like that. Cool. Now that gives it a nice landing. And then we can also use the camera to follow along. So let's go back to the camera view. And let's go ahead and let's put that back in. So let's go ahead and watch the animation. Comes up. Trying to keep up with it. There we go. It's falling backwards now. Following. That's going to stop. And then it's going to drop. Now at 390, I also want the camera to move. So we can watch it actually come down. So at 390, I'm going to move this. But what I want to do also is at 330, I want to keep it where it is. So I'm going to just basically click on twice so I can create the keyframe. Then at 390, I want to make sure that I'm down where it needs to be. So G, so camera selected, G on the Z. I got the plane selected. Let's make sure we get the right thing selected. G on the Z. We'll bring it down. There we go. All right, let's see how this reads. So start it. Takes off. Moves up. Following it. And then all of a sudden it decides to slow down and come down. Now we're falling down to the bottom. And what I would suggest is that at the very end, we'll add a little bit of a twist. So right here, we kind of want it to hover for a second before it falls down. And we also want to hit, I would say, let's go ahead and put in another 30 frames. So instead of 390, it'll be 420. So let's go ahead and add 420. And now at 420, I want it to kind of just the camera to sit there. So I'm going to also do this, perfect. And now what I want to do is right before it actually hits at 390, maybe 5 frames or 10 frames behind, we could actually do a kind of a twist. So let's go ahead and hit the main. And let's rotate this again on the X or Y. The main controller, I want to make sure I take this off. So I want to R on the Y at the last second. So we're going to go like that. And then right at 390, just like that. All right, let's go and play it. So just one more thing before we end this video. I thought it would be a little bit better reading if we actually added a little bit more at the end here. So when I've actually rotated it here and I rotate it back at 390, I kind of don't want it to hit the ground yet. I almost want it to be more of a, we're just going to hide this for now. I want this to kind of teeter-totter at 380. So we're going to swing in and swing out. So at 390, I don't want it to come down. I want it to stay at the height that it's at 380. So the height at 380 will be basically this 0 right here, which is fine. But I'm sorry, it's at this 062, 065, 064, whatever. So I'm going to copy this, Control C. And then at frame 90, I'm going to actually put this back in at that number, Control V. Because again, I want to just add a little bit of variations to the animation before I bring it down. Now, I've got this rotation going on here where it kind of rotates out. And then here at 400, I want it to rotate again. So at this time, I'm going to rotate again on the right, on the Y. So I'm going to go more of this way. So it's going to go down right here and then out. And then again, we're going to go down to 410. Rotate on the Y. And we're going to kind of level this out a little bit. And then we're going to drop it at 420 right to the floor. Control V, hit enter. G, like here. And we can put down Control V into this number here. Actually, what I want to make sure that we have on the main controller is that the first frame is this number. This is what we want. Control C. So let's go back to this last frame and we'll plop that in here. Control V. There we go. So there we go. So let's see how that reads. Go back to the camera view. Active. Play. Goes up. Spins out. Goes up. Trying to keep up with it. I did adjust the actual Z a little bit on the camera so it reads a little bit better. See, it kind of stops and spins out a little bit at the last minute to try to keep up. Slows down, comes down, tries to catch itself. All right, thanks for joining me. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.